I'm Toben Racicot, creator of Pilgrim's Dirge, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's July 30th, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Toben Racicot about Pilgrim's Dirge. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Toben is a writer and letterer from Ontario. He's worked on a variety of indie comics like Beastlands, SideQuest, Gimmick, and The Bite of Brenna Barlow. He studies role-playing games and collaborative world-building at the University of Waterloo. He grew up playing Super Nintendo and losing his eyesight playing Game Boy by the light of passing streetlights. His favorite games are Fire Emblem, Donkey Kong Country 2, and Diablo 2. His most recent project was Emulator, the focus of a podcast from March of this year. Toben's current project is Pilgrim's Dirge. Pilgrim's Dirge is a science fiction adventure in a post-apocalyptic solar system. The cataclysm awoke an ancient evil whose return threatens not just Earth but all existence. Oren Daniels must band together with unprecedented alien races to eliminate this threat and save the galaxy. If Oren thought Earth was a chilling place, he has no idea what awaits in the dark of space. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Toben Racicot about Pilgrim's Dirge. So, Toben Racicot, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thanks for having me back, John. This is a three-peat for me.
It's something, that's for sure. Well, I appreciate your time, absolutely. I know you're busy with stuff. But before we get started, wanted to ask you, who are you reading today? Who's on your bookshelf?
All right. So, funny enough, I haven't actually read that many comics lately. I did a read-through of the 3 trades that are out of Kieran Gillen's Die. Mm-hmm. If you've read that, it's a wonderful RPG deconstruction comic. But I'm actually getting back into kind of a series, or arguably the series that inspired my main creativity, which is the Brian Jakes Redwall series. If you've read that or if you know of it, it's like the anthropomorphic kind of fantasy stuff. It's what I read when I was 8, 9, 10, all the way back then and stuff. And I pulled them out and I wanted to read my favorite because my son's just kind of getting close to the age where he might start to listen to them and whatnot. So I wanted to kind of remind myself of them.
Cool.
But I'm anxiously awaiting the 4th trade. Well, the final issue first is next month, and then the final trade of Rick Remender's 7 to Eternity. We've been patiently waiting for that for basically all of the pandemic, it feels like.
Yeah. Good series for sure.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I wanted to talk today about your latest work, Pilgrim's Dirge, and I want to congratulate you, first of all, on getting it funded on Kickstarter. That's tremendous.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is a very exciting week. I mean, we've never had one go off this fast, and I'm sure you have questions about that, but let's dive into it.
Sure. So maybe for those not familiar with the story, maybe you could talk a little bit about Pilgrim's Dirge and what inspired you to create this story.
Perfect. So Pilgrim's Dirge is, I pitch it as a sci-fi, but with most of my work, there's kind of fantasy tropes and a lot of stuff now inspired by D&D as I've gotten into that in the past few years. But primarily it's a sci-fi story. A lot of it was inspired and came out of this necessity where when back in university, when Alaire and I, we were just starting to make webcomics, horrible webcomics. I think I've mentioned that before. And I ended up taking a semester off because I was doing like almost double the credits of what a full-time student takes just to kind of get through it faster and get into graduate studies and whatnot. And I said, I'm going to take a semester off. So I went back to my hometown in Saskatchewan and was completely devoid of basically any entertainment other than just continuing to make comics. And what I had been playing the previous semester was the brand new Bungie game called Destiny, right? This wonderful sci-fi MMO kind of thing. And it was fantastic. I was really obsessed with Halo when I was a teenager. And then Destiny was just like this revelation of stuff. And so I was cut off from that. And so when Alaire and I would get on these calls and she'd be illustrating and I'd be writing short stories and stuff at the time, I said, why don't we just do something that's kind of like this? We build, this kind of post-apocalyptic universe. We'll populate it with all different kinds of like alien species and stuff like that. And so I remember I taped two pieces of loose leaf together, and I drew a straight line, and I said, okay, the sun's over here, so where are all the planets? And I had this idea where, well, I don't think it's actually in the books, but I don't like saying it yet because it's probably a little bit too spoilery, but there's this cataclysm that happens. And basically for an easy kind of visual reference, imagine like a pool player doing a break, right? And you have all the balls and it just kind of gets scattered. And that's kind of where it all started from, was that. And so it was kind of, how can we build this alternate universe, or, this post grand event, and everything kind of gets shaken up. And then thematically, a lot of the things that I think about when I'm thinking about video games now is, like, I play a lot of single player video games, and the sense of isolation that you get, or that I feel when I play games, is very weird. Like, if you think about playing something like Ocarina of Time, that it's a very isolating feeling, right? It's almost kind of haunting and stuff. And so that's something that I was trying to do in the book. So it starts out with Oren Daniels, who's he's a deserter from this organization called CORE, the Celestial Orbit Reparation Effort. And they're partially military, they're partially science. They're trying to fix whatever this cataclysm caused to happen throughout the galaxy and the universe and solar system. But it's also militaristic because it's trying to reclaim Earth. And Earth is filled with these type of aliens called Exords. And they're a problem because they're making it basically uninhabitable. So he's there, he's all by himself, he hasn't seen his family in 3 years, and he's trying to figure out how to get back to his family. So there's a bunch of different potential calls to adventure that come his way, and he has to decide which path he's going to take. So that's kind of what the first issue brings us to.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement in that first issue. You pack a lot in there, and thanks for sending over that preview copy. But it makes you want to read more and
thanks.
Find out where the story's going.
That's the hope of every first issue, and that one was really fun too because I had a little bit more space with Emulator. It was only 20 pages, and then with Crown and Anchor we kind of cheated because we just said here's 140 pages all at once. But doing 28 pages, I got to be a little bit more verbose than I normally am. And it was fun because I tried out like inner monologues, which I hadn't done before. And so hopefully that tells a little bit more of the story, because Oren's pretty terse. He doesn't really talk. I mean, he doesn't do the Spider-Man stuff where he's talking to himself, although some other people have said, his demeanor kind of reminds me of Spider-Man and stuff. But trying to get into his head, and that has been a fun experience of writing this for sure.
Sure. Now let's talk about the collaborators on this project. I'm curious to find out who they are and how you found them.
Right. So this time with Emulator, I was working with only one Italian, and this time I'm working with two Italians, right? So it's,
okay.
If one is good, two is even better. So it was during, actually, we're coming up to like the year mark of when I started looking for all these things. I found Emiliana, who does Emulator, and Matteo, who's the illustrator on Pilgrim's Dirge, basically the same day. And I think what I did was I was on Twitter and I found one artist that I think he now draws Power Rangers or something, right? There's this like influx of Italian artists in DC and Boom and all that stuff, which is great. I love that art style. And so I said, if this is kind of the next rising star that I'm seeing, at least, who is following him? Right, who's looking to him for inspiration? And that's where I found Matteo and Emiliana. So Matteo has a lot of success. He was part of this huge Kickstarter called, I believe it's Cherry Necromancer, and it's all part of this universe of comics being built through Kickstarters and whatnot. And his subsequent graphic novel, I think, just was funded a little bit ago too. So he's really busy. His work is really, really great. He absolutely just took off running when I said, we're going to do sci-fi and there's going to be a little bit of fantasy and just do whatever you want. And so he was like, wow, what if the ships look like this? And what if the weaponry looks like this? And Oren's armor can do this and it has all these functionalities. And then these people can have this kind of armor. And, what if the core guards have this kind of armor? Like, he really was just running with it. And then the colorist is Martina Bonanni. And I borrowed her from Grant, who does SideQuest. if you've read Grant Stoy's side quest. So she colors that, and so I letter that, and Alaire's currently illustrating that. Issue 3, is in the works. And so I was originally going to use the same colorist Tank from Emulator on both, but as Pilgrim's Dirge became longer, we decided, hey, you focus on Emulator and do your best work there, and we'll find somebody to fill in.
Right. Well, what about the collaboration process? I think we may have touched on this before, but was there a language barrier of any sort or difficulty in communicating?
Not that I really found. I think there might have been a few things, probably, and it's probably less of a language barrier and more, again, just how lazy I script. Because again, I wrote all of these scripts thinking that Alaire was just going to write all of them, or to illustrate all of them.
Right.
So a lot of the problems that I run into is they'll do something and I go, oh, well, that's not what I wanted. And then I'll look at the script and I go, oh, well, I didn't actually say what I wanted because I'm so used to just saying, hey, for this page or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's yeah, I guess maybe, but I think where I'm at in my collaborative journey and my understanding as working as a letterer for so many people is I find that I thrive when people say, I trust you, I trust your artistic vision, do your best, right?
Right, yeah.
And I try to do that for all of my artists. And so there's a few pages where I said, make sure that this is a key item, or, something that's kind of highlighted, or here, make sure that, like scale, make sure Oren's in the foreground so that he looks a bit more intimidating or something like that. But Matteo, his level of artistic understanding is so good that it was really easy for me to say, here's basically probably the nitpickiest part was figuring out character designs.
Okay.
And then I think just like the kind of key object that Oren receives in this issue, because it's such a huge plot point, was another thing that we had to bounce back and forth. And it was easy because I just send him references and I say, start here, but then make it unique and put your own spin on it. So thankfully, because I've seen this in other collaborations that I've been a part of, where the writer has to basically put everything through Google Translate to be able to speak with their artists and stuff. So thankfully, it's not there. I mean, I would have done it anyways because the product is worth that. But both of them, Martina and Matteo, are really great English speakers, and emailing is really easy. And yeah, thankfully there were no hiccups with that kind of stuff.
Glad to hear. Well, it worked out quite well, that's for sure. So we spoke earlier this year about Emulator, and you brought up earlier in our conversation. I'm wondering how that project turned out.
That's a great question. So I did a cost breakdown on Twitter. I was trying to find it of like how much the art cost, how much we brought in through the Kickstarter, and how much printing costs and all that stuff. So from a financial standpoint, it didn't do very well, but that's okay because I look at Kickstarters not as a way to make money. It's a way to offset the cost of, what you're putting up out of pocket.
Right.
And I did a lot of experiments with the campaign itself. And we can bring that back to all the stuff if we want to talk about Pilgrim's Dirge's campaign. But with Emulator, I did only a 2-week campaign to try to minimize the mid-campaign lull. If there's, typically it's a 30-day campaign or whatnot. But I find especially when we did Crown and Anchor, the first week was really awesome. And then you had 2 weeks of us just screaming into the void of Twitter. And then the last 3 days were really awesome. And so I thought, well, why don't we just minimize that? And we just make it 10 days of awesomeness rather than, 80% us just being very annoying for the rest of Twitter. So that didn't really work because it didn't give people a whole lot of time to find it. I also had this idea where, because I've seen other collaborators do this, where if we have a really low goal off the bat, if people see that it's funded, they'll be more likely to contribute. And I don't think that really worked out. I mean, it might have, but I think overall the biggest offender was we just didn't give the project enough time to really find readers. And then the ultimate offender was beyond the length of the campaign and that kind of stuff is we announced that this thing existed, and then 2 weeks later we launched the Kickstarter.
Oh, okay.
So again, there wasn't enough time to really get people excited, to get the word out. A few people responded with reviews and that kind of stuff, and interviews and whatnot. But it really was just us talking to our 300 followers at the time or whatever.
Right. Well, sorry to hear, but a lesson learned, right?
Yeah, that's only one side of it. Again, comics are expensive no matter what, but the response that we're getting is very favorable.
Good. Well,
and so the people who have read it, whether it's me sending out review copies or the backers or whatnot, they're excited, they enjoyed it, they want some more, and so issue 2 will be coming. But yeah, definitely learned a lot of things that we tried to do differently for Pilgrim's Dirge, that's for sure.
Okay, good. Now, another project we talked about last time was Crown and Anchor. You mentioned that before. You had said previously that Volume 2 might be coming out later this year, so I'm wondering if that's still the plan.
Once Alaire finishes side quest number 3, which is about a month away. She's about a little bit over half, so she'll get that finished up in August. She'll be moving back to Crown and Anchor. The Kickstarter will be coming out in October, and then we'll be shipping the books. We're aiming for kind of a February, March to get them into people's hands, because it's really simple. The way that we work is, super ideal for comics. And because there's no colorist, it's just us two. So whenever she finishes a page, I can letter it, and then I just socket it right into the PDF or like the InDesign file for the final PDF. So there's no in between. It's just, from one to the other, and then it's gone. So yeah, I think she's about halfway through issue 8, and the second trade will be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's about half done already, and then once side quest is out of the way, it's just the rest of the year rocking through. So we will be doing the Kickstarter before everything is fully done, which is kind of abnormal for us. We do like to have the thing done before we start taking money for it. But this one, just to kind of get ahead of the Christmas rush and all the New Year's bills and all that kind of stuff, we want to try to do it in October.
Oh, very good. And fingers crossed, don't want to jinx anything. Maybe it might show up at a festival or convention next year.
It'd be so fun. Yeah, it'd be so fun to go back to TCAF or any of the even smaller local shows. It'd be fun to get back to. Yeah.
It would. Now, you've been talking a bit about Kickstarter here off and on. So I'm wondering, with that in mind, what advice would you pass along to someone who wants to make their own comic book using Kickstarter? I know we could go on for hours about it, but is there one or two things that you want them to focus on?
Yeah, we've actually seen a lot of interesting things with Pilgrim's Dirge that we hadn't even seen in stuff like Crown and Anchor, and even we're very close. We work really closely with Grant on his side quest campaigns and stuff too. So primarily, something that we've seen this time around that we hadn't before is we're getting a ton of video plays.
Oh.
Now, if you're making a Kickstarter, they say there's a little kind of asterisk that says like 80% of campaigns funded have a video. And so it's Kickstarter itself is trying to say, hey, you probably should throw something there. And I didn't have one for Emulator because my philosophy, again, I'm a really weird consumer especially when it comes to Kickstarter, is I want to keep things really clean. I want things to be really readable. And so I said to myself for Emulator, like, why am I going to do a video if everything that's in the video is going to be in the campaign, right? If you scroll down, you're going to get the contents of the video at your own pace. And so for this one, I said, well, instead of, making it a trailer, right, in a world, that kind of thing, I said, I'm just going to make it really personal. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to give a really quick pitch of what it is. And then I'm just going to, basically say, thank you for taking the time to check this out. Hopefully you find something cool. So I did that. It was about 45 seconds. And I started posting it the first week that the campaign launched. And I got some feedback off Reddit where somebody said, why is there no art being shown in this video? And I thought, that's interesting. I've never actually considered that people would be watching the video outside of Kickstarter, right? On a different site when I share it.
Sure.
And so I said, okay, that's really great feedback. So I went back to Adobe and I basically did a slideshow of the preview pages and the cover, kind of off to one side. And then I reposted it. And our views went from like 20 with it was a really low completion percentage. It was like 4 or 5 or 6 or something like that. To now we have over 200 plays with like a 95% completion rate.
Wow.
And so I was like, that in and of itself is a huge accomplishment. Like,
sure,
that boggles my mind. So that's the very first tip: is do something very quick. They say under a minute. I was trying to shoot for 30 seconds because, right, there's so much content on Kickstarter that you got to get it through fast. So have a video, make sure you show some art, and just be yourself. Like, one of the things that I love about other people's videos is when it's just kind of them goofing off, doing some kind of like skit almost, because you get a sense of who's creating it, not necessarily what the creation is. And I think that for me in comics, especially, having some kind of connection with the creator is more meaningful than the story that they're creating, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's the first one, a video. The second one is budget time before to build some kind of following. Another way of saying it is like have a really strong launch pad or landing pad. I don't remember if it's landing or launch. Either way, Kickstarter gives you a page before you launch it, but after it's approved, that allows potential customers or potential backers to follow the campaign.
Oh, okay.
Which allows, or when they follow it, they'll get an email when it goes live. They'll get updates. They'll get emails a few days before it's done saying, hey, if you haven't backed it yet, you only have a few hours left.
Okay.
So that is what we really pushed hard this time. We would do stuff where, at 20, we'll show off the variant cover. At 40, we'll show off the print that Alaire did. At 60, we were trying to get to 50. And I was like, when we get to 50, I'll show you this video of this drum solo that I did like a couple of years ago, right? Just something to catch people's attention. Yeah. And we had ideas of like at 75, we're going to start releasing recipes. And then at 100, we're going to start doing that stuff, right? Again, just trying to be ourselves and have fun with it. So that was really great. I think we had about 72, 73 before the campaign even launched. Wow. And I was going to check where we're at now, but I think we're over 200 followers as well for that.
That's great.
And so all of that, right? It's not immediate backers, but there's potential. Yeah, 236. So there's a good chunk of potential there, again, before we finish the campaign of what can happen in terms of more backers. And then the last thing probably that we've seen so far is we tried some wonky stuff this time around. So we did a print, and for emulator, it was very bare bones. I was like, I don't want to print any more than the comic. I don't want to do commissions. I don't want to do print, just very, very bare bones. And with this one, I said, let's have a little bit more fun. Let's try to do some stuff. And so Alaire agreed to do a commission tier. So if you're working with an artist, figure out if they're comfortable doing that kind of thing. Another one actually that similar to it that Grant uses in SideQuest is kind of an NPC tier where people can be drawn into the comic.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so we wanted to do that I wanted to do that because it was so successful with SideQuest, but because this one's more sci-fi and you're not really seeing a bunch of actual humans pretty soon, I was like, that's not going to work and whatnot. So that didn't work. So instead we did the commission tier, and then I did one where you can get your comic lettered by me at a discounted rate, and then you get the comic as well on top of it.
Oh, okay.
So just other ways of bringing in potential readers and backers and stuff like that. So, and that's very personal to me and the things that I want to offer. But it's worth thinking about because I'm working with another writer who had a very successful Kickstarter, and we're breaking down the cost of everything, right? Because there's multiple potential prints, and there's the issue is going to have a lot of pages and all this stuff, and those costs add up really fast.
Oh yeah.
So if you shoot really far with, here's all these diverse rewards and prints and shirts, like don't do shirts. That's probably another point in and of itself, is don't do shirts at all. You'll absolutely regret it. But the cost adds up, because if you print, if you offer 4 prints and everybody buys kind of 2 or 3 of each, that cost is really high. For Kickstarter, or for comics in general. The more you print, the cheaper it is per unit, and that's kind of what you want.
Right. Yep.
And I had one pop into my head about something, and now I can't remember what it was. So that's what you get.
Okay, no, that's lots of good advice for sure. For sure, for sure. Well, we've talked about a lot of your projects, Pilgrim's Dirge and Emulator and Crown and Anchor, but I'm wondering what's next. If there is there anything else that you haven't spoken about that you have coming down the pipe?
Oh man, well, there's always lots of lettering going on. I've been busier than ever, probably with lettering a bunch of different stuff that I've just picked up that I can't really talk about yet, but a lot of it will be coming to Kickstarter. So, I mean, there's Curtis Clow's work. Beastlands 6 and 7 are going to be coming out soon. Slightly Exaggerated is coming out soon. SideQuest coming out soon. I know there's more. I can't think of them at the top of my head. But in terms of stuff that I'm creating, so Crown and Anchor will be this fall. We're still kind of talking about when Pilgrim's Dirge number 2 is going to happen. It'll probably be the spring, just to give Mateo time because he's so busy. And then Emulator will probably be in the summer. Number 2 of that will be in the summer. And beyond that, I'm not going to push myself too much for like more ongoing series. Alaire and I have been talking about doing maybe a one-shot. We have kind of like a 28, 32 page, like one and done kind of thing that we're kicking around. Mm-hmm. But I think ultimately I want to start doing like 1 to 3 page stories again, because I have this little anthology that I just printed like on 8.5 by 11s called Story Snacks. And it was this compilation of stuff that I did. I don't even think we put it online. It was just stuff that I wanted to do with people from college that we went to school with. Mm-hmm. And I thought I should expand that because they're easy to print. You know, you just go to Staples and you can use the black and white printers. And I have like the comic stapler. I bought one so I can just sit at my dinner table and staple the comic. And it's really fun kind of having that hands-on experience. It teaches me a lot about the production side of comics and learning that. So I've been kicking around that kind of idea. But ultimately I think I'm just going to have a busy fall doing school stuff. And then we'll get Pilgrim's Dirge shipped out, and then we'll keep working on Crown and Anchor. So that's a long answer to say not yet. There won't be anything coming yet, but there's a lot that I'm starting to think about in terms of potential things for next year, especially, you know, if conventions start happening, I've got to start thinking about bringing stuff out for that. And, you know, yeah, it's fun. It's exciting.
Well, it sounds like you're going to be busy. So I'm wondering where you recommend people go online to find out about your current and your future projects.
All right. So we have a website, racicot.art. You can find out stuff. Well, that's probably the best place because that's where you can sign up for the newsletter. And that's what we're most consistent in publishing. You get one every 3 weeks through 4 weeks, something like that, of good things. That's where we do include recipes. So if you do, recipes, sign up for the newsletter. But other than that, the most used platform is Twitter. So it's twitter.com/Toben Racicot, I think. It's pretty simple. Yeah, that's what it is. And there will be a lot of GIFs. I'm getting into GIF creation for comic promotion. Okay. That's something we could have talked about for Kickstarter. That's a fun one. And yeah, just lots of sound effects that I post when I'm lettering, and you'll get some recommendations for game soundtracks that I listen to when I letter. And I've had this idea where I want to start doing like my favorite Frasier quote every single day.
Oh, okay.
Because I watch Frasier almost nonstop when I work. That's like the main I go to. And I was like, there's so many good lines in the show. I want to just start a huge Twitter thread where it's, you know, those calendars where it's like a daily, like Far Side, right?
Yes, right.
You rip it off in the next one, something like that. I was like, that'd be fun to do with Frasier quotes or whatnot.
Thanks to Toben for the chat. You can discover more about Toben on Twitter at Toben Racicot. That's TobenRacicot, and online at racicot.art. You can discover more about Pilgrim's Dirge at pilgrimsdirge.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.